Good day. My name is H.B. Charles Jr., the pastor of the Shiloh Church in Jacksonville, Florida, author of the books On Pastoring and On Preaching, and I have a blog site that you can find at H.B. Charles Jr. I'm glad to have joining me for this conversation the pastor of the Galilee Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan, and the president of the Pastors and Ministers Division of the National Baptist Convention, and a national preacher himself, and an influential voice in the pulpit in this generation, Dr. Tellis Chapman. Thanks for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So those who are watching this who may not know of you and your ministry, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Tellis Chapman, born and bred Mississippi, called to Galilee Baptist Church, Detroit. Been there for 32 years.
32 years.
Yeah,
Praise
37
God.
years in the ministry.
Yes, sir. So what part of Mississippi did you grow up in?
Pascagoula, water border town, Gulf of Mexico. Yeah,
Did you grow up in church?
all my life. My dad was a pastor.
Dad was a pastor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all my life.
Where did your father serve?
Several places, actually,
Okay.
throughout the state of Mississippi, as quiet as it is kept. Licensed to preach at Convent Baptist Church, Harlem, New York.
Wow.
And the late Dr. Bob Wilson.
Yes, indeed.
Served at St. Luke Baptist Church under the late Dr. Walter Harding, and later moved back to the South and started pastoring several churches, several locations throughout the state of Mississippi.
So I can imagine your father's ministry had a great influence on you.
Probably the most influential
Sure.
of all pastors.
Yeah. So when did how old were you, what were the circumstances of you when you trusted Christ?
Trusted Christ at an early age, like 13, 14. I acknowledged my calling at the age of 19.
Okay.
Freshman in college.
Okay.
And getting ready to go out for spring training for basketball.
Wow.
Like the following week, and this Sunday I began preaching,
So
and the rest is history.
you went to college thinking you'll do something in athletics, or what were you studying?
Actually, I was studying sociology, psychology minor, working at the YWCA, trying to make ends meet as a college student. You know how that could get to be.
Sure.
But my aspiration was to play ball,
Sure.
and but the Lord had other plans.
What position did you play?
Point guard.
Point guard. Right. So did you say you had been running from something that you had sensed over time, or was it a rather sudden thing?
I don't think I really understood it, but sitting down and talking with my father and with my pastor in college, while I was in college rather, helped me to understand the faith walk.
Sure.
And pursuing God and understanding, what that burning zeal could really imply.
Sure.
And that it wouldn't rest within me until I surrendered.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't a running from, it was a more of a pursuing to understand so as to be sure.
Sure. Yeah. So at 19, when you surrendered to a call to preach, what happens next? You have an agenda for your life with sports, and you acknowledge a call. What?
Actually, I began walking in the footsteps of my father. Many of his colleagues who discovered that he had had a son preaching began to reach out, and I began preaching for many of my father's friends. And a year following my acknowledgement of my call, I started pastoring. So it really wasn't a time like, if we can say, a downtime, for the lack of a better phrase, in terms of having to be occupied with the call, because I was always, and you being a boy preacher yourself, following in your father's footsteps, pretty much followed that same line. So it was always someplace, somewhere, as while I was in school, being invited to preach.
Wow. So did you say you started pastoring at age of 20?
At age of 20,
Yeah. So
I didn't know what I was doing, but
right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I fully understand that. So how did that church find you, or how did you find that church?
I was in a revival meeting in Meridian, Mississippi, Mount Zion Baptist Church, the late Dr. J.T. Hall. And at that time, my first church, Little Hope Baptist Church, Tumsuba, Mississippi, 10 miles east of Meridian on the I-20 corridor. And this church, my first church, was vacant at the time. And the chair of deacons came, and he later brought some others with him, and invited me to come to preach at their church. And a few months after I preached, they extended the call.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long did you serve them?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So from 20 to 25, you are still a new preacher when you're a new pastor.
Basically.
What would you say how was your preaching developing during that first pastorate over those 5 years?
Actually, I sat under the tutelage of my pastor in college, late Dr. James C. Matthews, who was a seminary professor, taught New Testament, Mississippi Baptist Seminary. So sitting around him, being around my father 180 miles away south, having come up and watched it all of my life, I guess I learned by observation, by listening, by inquiring, etc. And as I would preach, they would critique. And of course, old school mentoring meant you went in a back room somewhere and you got a ball and, and you didn't make such mistakes as you made before. So, and I'm still learning. It's not that I'm there, but you asked about the developmental issue. I'm still learning the mechanics and dynamics of preaching and pastoring. But my early years was being shaped by, my pastor, my father, and other pastors of their peers shared with me the do's and don'ts. Yeah.
So you are influenced early by your father, by your college pastor.
Yeah.
Who are there other men that you would say had an influence on your philosophy of preaching, development of your style of preaching?
Oh, yeah. Dr. William J. Shaw, Dr. Allen B. Green. Of course, Dr. Shaw was former president of the National Baptist Convention, USA Incorporated. Dr. Allen B. Green, he was the writer for the Sunday School Publishing Board during the 1980s, during the Dr. T.J. Jemison era. They have been probably the most influential man. And then my brother, Dr. Abraham Smith, professor at SMU, Perkins School of Theology in Dallas. My father licensed him at the age of 9.
Wow.
And now, of course, he teaches in the seminary. But those are the three, aside from my father and my pastor in college, who have been the most influential, and yet those three still live, most influential individuals in my ministry.
Wow, that is great.
Yeah.
Great men.
Yeah.
So after 5 years serving there, what happens next?
I'm called to Galilee Baptist Church in Detroit.
Wow.
Give you darn it. The East Mississippi Baptist Seminary was convening in Columbia, Mississippi. The late Dr. Richard Sylvester Porter, great story behind Dr. Porter, at his church, Orange Chapel Baptist Church. And during the East Mississippi State Convention, they always invite a preacher of the National Baptist Convention who's in the president's cabinet. If the president cannot come, they would invite the president to preach on what they dub as J.H. Jackson's Night, Joseph Harrison Jackson Night, and that Dr. Jackson was from Mississippi. At the time, Dr. Jemison was the president, who could not come. So he was sending Dr. Henry J. Lyons, in his place. Dr. Lyons had prepared to come, but for whatever reason, he was prevented. And the search was out there for a replacement for Dr. Lyons. Dr. T.J. Jemison, Dr. Theodore Cornelius Simmons, who was pastor of Messiah Baptist Church in Detroit at the time, who at that time had the largest Christian education week in Black Church America. He was invited to come in the place of those two gentlemen to preach on J.H. Jackson's Night. The noonday service of the same day, the guest preacher didn't show, or the scheduled preacher didn't show. So Dr. Porter, who was a friend of my father, invited me to take the place of the noonday preacher. Dr. Simmons was there. And after I'd finished preaching, we got acquainted. Columbia is like, 80 miles south of Jackson, Mississippi. He had to leave from Columbia that night to get back to Jackson, Mississippi, to catch a plane to get back to Detroit the day after. I had to leave Columbia, Mississippi to get back to Jackson to go to class the next day. So he asked if he could ride with me back that night because I was driving.
Yeah.
And we got acquainted. He invited me to come to Galilee, to a Messiah, to preach a revival for him. First year, that would be doing 6 days, start Sunday, end Friday,
oh, Lord,
okay?
Yes.
So the next year I went back. Between those times, the pastor where I am now had passed away. He knew the pastor's wife, Miss Zenobia Brantley. She came one day, went back, called the chair of deacons. He went back and called the leader for the pulpit committee. Pulpit committee came. They interviewed me in Dr. Simmons's office.
Wow.
That Friday night.
Wow.
Closing night. Invited me to come to Galilee, and I think I went twice to preach there. And in a snowstorm, the church gathered for a church meeting for the calling of pastor for that church, and they called me to come and serve. Now here's providence in the predicament and in the picture. Neither he nor I were originally scheduled to preach on the agenda in the East Mississippi Baptist State Convention.
Yeah.
But that's how the Lord put the two of us together.
Yeah.
And I've been there for 32 years.
Wow. That is an amazing story.
Yeah.
That is an amazing
That's
story.
how it happened.
Yes, sir. There are no accidents with God.
No accident. Yeah, he's not fortuitous.
Sure.
Yeah.
So were you in that season of your life, were you looking for a transition, or were you, the Lord just opened the door?
Not really. I was pastoring two good country churches. Yeah, Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, Jenkins, Alabama, wonderful people. If we had 100 people there on a Sunday, we were packed out. Okay?
Yeah.
And my first church, Little Hope Baptist Church, great people. Wasn't a large church, but I was doing fine.
Sure.
You know, two churches and starting a young family. Was doing okay. And the Lord just worked it out. Matter of fact, I nearly got on medication trying to make the decision.
Wow.
You know, to leave home, to leave family, my environment where I grew up. You know, I'd gotten on some medication to leave.
Sure.
Yeah. Because it was just that, I guess, imposing upon my body.
Yeah.
I guess we would call it stress nowadays, I guess.
When I was called to this church and the Lord led me to accept.
Yeah.
When I got home, I sat on the couch. I couldn't get off the couch.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop crying.
Yeah.
Been there. For a week. And they asked me, it would take me 3 months to get here.
Wow.
And they asked me would I, for those months, fly in to preach on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And I said, no way. And my wife said, I think you need to do that. You need to get off this couch.
Yeah, been there, man.
Yeah.
I developed a stomach ulcer, not that I'd eaten different, wrong kinds of foods and what have you. But that was the real issue in the event of making the decision to leave home, go a place where I did not know where I was going, among a people whom I did not know.
Yes, sir.
But following God's lead, and I've noticed, and you in your preaching, and not a prophet, but no prophet that was effective at all served at home.
Yeah, sure.
All of them, he got them away from home.
Yes, sir.
And look at the results of our preaching because of our preaching of our prophets whom the Lord got out of their natural setting, their environment, got them away from home to influence another community.
Sure, and I would say very candidly, I didn't want to come here. I was comfortable. And now, almost 10 years later, I could say that might be why the Lord moved me. Because I was comfortable.
Wow.
And
get us out of the comfort zone.
If he had not drugged me out of my comfort zone, it would have
and
probably
thank God he did.
And thank God he did.
Yeah, and the world has opened up. You've had this experience. You're having this experience. Had you not made the move, look at how we will have cut ourselves off from what else the Lord had in abeyance for us which he will have kept from us had we not made the decision that we made.
Sure. So you're also not only moving from home to Detroit, but with all due respect, you're moving kind of from the country to the big city.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that part of the transition?
It was a culture shock, a reality check, because the dynamic of worship, interaction, social environment, is quite different.
Sure.
And this is not to demean or belittle or disparage rural life and rural church life, but church dynamic and a social setting in real city metropolitan environment is, of course, quite different. And but for the most part, when it comes to the real essence of worship,
Sure. So what kind of church was Galilee when you arrived?
Galilee was an exciting, I wouldn't say altogether charismatic, but an exciting church that appreciated the word, solid, with substance, of course. They'll go along with the celebration, true enough, but I discovered that they were more and are more privy to embrace the substantive delivery of a given message, whereas in the Southern culture, you have not preached until you have celebrated.
Sure.
So that was a culture shock. And the relationship aspect of it, you have to kind of earn. In the South, that's Junior.
Yeah.
We watched him grow up. That's Dr. Chapman's son. Okay, he's all right. But whereas there, nobody really knew me except for preaching. I did not know any of them, so I had to build those kind of relationships because in the city, everybody's a suspect.
Sure.
Churches have been exploited by pastors of whatever type of lifestyle that they've lived. So you're a suspect.
Right.
And I was for a little while. Until, I got into the hearts of the people, they got into my hearts, and we built relationships, etc. So that was a different thing to become adapted to.
Sure. Yeah.
And the weather, of course.
Absolutely. So I would preach every year for the Burnett Church and Dr. Caldwell. But this was during the spring and all of that. My first time going to Detroit in winter, oh my goodness.
It woke you up, didn't it?
It did indeed.
Oh, yeah.
So Detroit has been, over the years, a preaching mecca. 32 years ago. Who were the major preachers there when you got
Charles
to
Butler, former dean of Morehouse. Charles Gilchrist Adams of Hartford Memorial. Frederick George Sampson. Tabernacle Baptist Church. Of course, I caught the tail end of the late Dr. C.L. Franklin. New Bethel Baptist Church, because he was down in his comatose state, but still the presence of those preachers and pastors in the Detroit preaching fraternity were the dominant names that I heard when I went to Detroit, and preachers that I went to hear and preach, etc. Which, of course, caused me to kind of dig deeper and aspire to do more and become better, because if what they did got them where they were and who they are, then somewhere along the way I have to find that path. So those were the pastors in churches that were like prevalent and dominant.
But the week my father passed, I was in Detroit preaching for Dr. Roy Allen.
Dr. Roy Allen,
Chapel Hill Church was
Chapel Hill,
on Joy Road.
Yes.
So when I first moved to Jacksonville, one of the first guys who embraced me here took me to lunch and recommended a book that he had just been reading and said, this might help you. And the book was entitled, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. That you get to the next place because of gift, skill, okay, but what got you there won't move you forward when you get to that place. You have to learn to adapt and to stretch for the new place.
I agree.
In what areas, moving from Mississippi to Galilee, did you feel like it stretched you the most in this new pastorate there in Galilee?
Well, some of it was I did not have the crutch or crutches there that I had in Mississippi.
Sure.
Because most every place I went, my father had already been there.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Yes, sir.
So I did not have the crutches or the cushions that I had in Mississippi. And I therefore, having observed the greatness and brilliance of a Frederick George Sampson, a Charles Adams, a Charles Butler, or a Roy Allen, those were sort of like idols to young pastor preachers in the Detroit area, and for that matter around the nation.
Sure.
So I had to establish relationship with these pastors and find private moments and ask questions.
Yeah.
And pick their brains and worry them and be in the way and get on their nerves. You know? Say, how did you do this? And why did you do this? And they shared with me their wisdom and their mistakes.
Yeah.
And having done so, I was able to get from point A to point B to point C, etc. And a lot of that I still carry
Sure.
in my heart.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
And I
sir.
get chills sometimes talking about it because they're all gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can feed now on the advice that I got from them, and things they shared with me in an immediate setting did not happen until years later. And when those times came and what they said came to pass, you know, I wish I could go back now and dig them up and say, hey, you were right.
Yep.
I got it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am grateful for all of the benefits of technology that we have at our disposal. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this without it, and it gives us an opportunity to serve in great ways. But I'm also glad, and I would say my generation is the last generation. We didn't grow up with YouTube and all of that, and you had to come up the ranks.
Of course.
Which is another dynamic that I feel like the younger preacher sees a path through that skips all of that. But there is, you know, it's like the butterfly having to struggle out of the cocoon is what strengthens the wings. And those older preachers where you felt like you were being fussed at and mistreated and all of that had a shaping effect. And I look back and say, golly, they were right about all that stuff.
Oh, they were right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was their way of teaching and training. I remember, you know, very early on, perhaps my first year, maybe 2 years of preaching, definitely my first year, I had not preached 3 sermons. Dr. James Matthews, my pastor in college, the district association was meeting at his church, Shady Grove Baptist Church, Jackson, Mississippi. It was long and tall. So, and he was on to preach, right? So they're singing Amazing Grace. So by the time they get to through many dangers, toil, and snares, he reaches over and says, all right, get ready to preach. So now I'm sweating and trembling, you know, about to, you know, have a glandular function. And got on up and did whatever I did. Of course, you know, the old man got up behind me and he sort of cleaned it up and all that. But when I sat down, he grabbed me by the arm and said, don't ever, point at me, all church just packed. Just pointing his finger and said, now don't ever let me catch you without a sermon in your head or one in your pocket.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Ever again.
Yes, sir.
And like on the way home or wherever we went to eat that night, you know, he said, okay, now this may happen. Lights might go out on you. Storm might blow up. You might lose your manuscript. Always keep a sermon in reserve. Have one in your head and in your heart. He said, let this be a lesson to you.
Yeah. And
across the years, it came back. He's passed and gone, but it came back. But the younger preacher on the scene now is all but media made.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. And they are generation technology. So for them not to have gotten that kind of burning with their learning, I think presents them a misfortune.
Yeah. It's kind of like
because
music.
they didn't quite get it. Yeah.
It's kind of like music where it's one thing to have those R&B singers, gospel singers who had to work their way up in the clubs.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays they take somebody who got the look and put them in a studio.
Yeah.
And then you hear them live and say they can't actually sing.
Right.
They have, you know, an image they have sold.
Right.
And I feel like there is the danger where you could try to build your ministry on an image rather than the work of learning to preach. But that was what the hard work of learning and prep is what's going to keep you for the long haul, though.
I agree. And therein lies the difference between relying upon mechanics and dynamic. Yeah. And one relies more upon their gift and a script more so than divinity and soul. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it therefore affects the pew that way, because we're in a church worship culture now. And this is no offense to Bible readers or listeners or worshipers, but can you imagine the millennial generation the generation that follows the millennial generation as what they will be getting because the young pastor is not as prepared as their predecessors were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say not only did the old men teach our generation how to preach, but the congregation did, because they knew the Bible and they knew when.
That's all I'm saying.
And we live in a day of increasing biblical illiteracy. Yeah. And it's going to be important that the young guy knows where true north is.
Oh God, yes, yes. He needs to know his navigation.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Because I mean, it's emotion and emotive response and celebration is good, but good meat makes its own gravy.
Yes, sir.
So to speak proverbially. And I think people deserve, 21st century pew deserves substance. Sure. Information, enlightenment, as well as inspiration. I can shout, but I know what I'm shouting about. Don't just go after my feet or go after their feet. Aim for their head, the feet will follow.
Sure. Yes, sir. That is great. I want to kind of talk more about preaching, but I do want to ask one more biographical process question, because I'm slow in this conversation with you, because the persons who are watching this who know you as Tellis Chapman, the national preacher. But as your story is, it was not always that. And it is a coming up of the, as they say, you don't know the story, you just know the glory. But what was the turning point for you so your preaching ministry is in Detroit. From the start, you're getting a lot of opportunities to preach, or how did that develop over the years as you are developing your work there? You are also developing a national voice. Right. Yeah. Did that happen subtly or gradually over the years?
It did not. By accident, actually. I shared with you the means by which I got to Detroit.
Yes, sir.
I was exposed to the national presence or national body, if we can call it that, during one of the late night services of our National Baptist Convention. Donald Parson, who was a great preacher, bright-minded, powerful preacher, did not show. Dr. Frank Ray was the chair of the late night services at that time. And his wife at the time, I'd seen her someplace earlier in the day, and I guess I was the only preacher that came to her mind. She said to him, "Call Chat." I just saw him, call Chat. And he called and said, "Look, man, get ready. I don't think Donald is going to be here tonight." And from that was the night that I was exposed to National Baptist as a preacher.
Wow.
And from that point, it was, maybe 2 or 3 years later, late night, 2 or 3 years later, late night. And then I was appointed chairperson of late night worship services by Dr. Julius Scruggs. And at the close of his tenure, Dr. Jerry Young asked me to serve, as he came on for president of the National Convention, asked me to serve as the president of the Pastors and Ministers Division.
Sure.
But back to the biographical aspect, and my developing, and my drive and my motivation. My second or third year preaching, my father was pastoring the Antioch Baptist Church in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And for whatever reason, the church got where they didn't want him anymore. So we had to leave that church. Of course, I was in college, but we as a family had to leave that church, so we organized a church and was meeting in the high school gym, which was Pascagoula High School, what they call Pascagoula High School Annex, which with the building was the former black school, Carver High School, George Washington Carver. So some of the antagonists got wind of it. They circulated a petition against the superintendent and the school board, on the premise of separation of church and state, one supposed to be having church worship services in school, etc. So they circulated the petition and forced the principal, who was a friend of my father, to vacate the school and not have worship there anymore. And a former professional football player, Verlon Biggs, used to play with the Washington Redskins, owned a nightclub in Moss Point, Mississippi. That's like 2 neighboring towns. And he heard about it. And he called my father and said, "Listen, Reverend Chapman, I heard about what happened to you guys. I don't have much to offer. I have a vacant nightclub," and at that time it was called the Kickoff Club. You know what a nightclub is, right?
Yes, sir.
It might have held maybe 200 people, He said, "You're welcome to use it for as long as you need it."
Wow.
So now he organized, of course, in the gymnasium as a congregation. And from that point moved to the Kickoff Club. Now, it was in the Kickoff Club, that nightclub, where I was ordained to pastor.
Sir.
And with that 200 people, or however many there it was, that night, I remember it just like it was yesterday. I was ordained. And I wasn't ordained in a cathedral like this, I wasn't fortunate to come along and have a lot of hands laid on me as in an ordination ceremony, as has a lot of other prominent pastors or preachers around the nation. I was ordained in a nightclub. And that has been my motivation. If not, and of course, that church congregation finally got out of that nightclub. He bought a building, bought a church building, paid for it, no money, no credit, that sort of thing. He's passed away. The church still exists. And that nightclub is still there. It hasn't been used for anything else but that.
Wow.
So that has been my motivation and my drive.
Yes, sir.
As a pastor, as a preacher who moved from small congregations in rural Mississippi, ordained in a nightclub, now giving leadership in the National Baptist Convention and Congress for pastors, writer for Sunday School Publishing Board of the National Baptist Convention, sir. And now sitting having an interview in Jacksonville, Florida.
Yes, sir.
All of that came out of a nightclub.
My. Yeah. What a mighty God we serve.
Oh, God. People know it. People see your glory, but they don't understand the journey towards that glory.
Sure. Absolutely. Yes, sir. So if I could talk shop with you, what is over the years of your preaching ministry, what has been your prep manner?
Yeah.
I saw a piece of one of your messages online from the Congress of Christian Education that just met.
Okay.
Did you have a manuscript?
I did.
Yeah. So are you
just a week or two ago?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Are you historically a manuscript
I
preacher?
do mostly extemporaneous, but sometimes I'll use a script. And I use a script because sometimes if I don't have time to get it off of the paper,
Yes, sir.
to my head, off the iPad or computer to my head, then I trust what I've already thought through.
Sure.
It's much easier to just read it off. Not that it's extremely hard to do extemporaneously, but yes, I do use a manuscript. But most times it's extemporaneous. It's on feet. But by the time I do that, I have spent some time getting it from the paper, so to speak, to my head and in my heart.
So
I feel more comfortable without it.
So you're saying, so I describe myself as a manuscript preacher who cheats.
Okay.
I write a manuscript,
Yeah.
but my goal is not to go to the pulpit with it.
I hear you.
What are you writing down during the week? Are you writing much notes? Or are you writing
Oh, God, yes. Writing much notes before the sunrise. I kiss it, hello, or good morning.
Sure.
Yeah, and of course, you know the process. And you're inspired to read or preach a certain passage of Scripture, get the context, what the author was after,
Sure.
the message, get the big idea, get the cultural background
Right.
as of where that passage or context or text comes from, do the word study. Do your Greek, do your Hebrew, whatever it calls for. And from whatever that idea is, begin to write down notes, thoughts that you gather from what you've read and the angle or vantage point that you want to go or take that passage of Scripture. And from that point, maybe in about day 3, can begin writing and developing a legitimate, presentation with some organization that people can follow while you're in the delivery mode.
Sure.
So if I'm inspired to preach a passage, those are the the A, B, C to Z
Sure.
steps that I would take in preparing to get ready to preach on Sunday. And as you very well know, sometimes what you prepare during the week, you may have to change. Yeah, on Sunday. And I think you're doing maybe 2 or 3 sermons a Sunday, and so sometimes I will take a script. If I'm not comfortable with it, preaching it without the notes, then I'll take the pad.
Sure.
And I mean, no apologies for it because it's still God's word, and it's still the word that God has given me to deliver to that assembly at that time.
Yeah. As I'm getting older, I am no longer neurotic about it.
Oh,
If I need it,
bring it.
yeah. I mean, and I don't want to sacrifice clarity for style.
Thank you.
And if I need, as I get older, and when you've had one of those weeks, and sometimes you're just, it's not coming back to you as quickly.
Right. And you're exhausted in many cases. And we don't have, for the most part at our disposal, writers and researchers to put it all together for you.
Right.
And you just get up and deliver it. And if you're doing this Sunday after Sunday, 2 and 3 times a Sunday, and week after week, and you don't want to repeat,
Yes.
then you either have to have that kind of support team or you will repeat.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with repeating, but the case in point, when we commit ourselves, exhaust ourselves in preaching, my pastor once said to me, if the message hasn't shouted or moved you or caused you to lean over and wipe tears from off of that script or that iPad, he said, then obviously you're not as into it as it needs to be into you.
My.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Man. So, are you at a place? Do you have a goal at a marker during the week where you want to be finished for Sunday, or
Monday's Tuesday, Tuesday's Wednesday, Wednesday is Friday.
Yeah.
And Saturday, this is my philosophy. Monday's Tuesday, Tuesday's Wednesday, Wednesday's Friday. And Saturday is a day for, relaxation, reflection. You should have it committed to memory by then. And then Sunday is time for delivery.
Yes, sir.
And I saw Dr. Frederick Sampson once, and I've forgotten who preached before him, but he preached a sermon, and when he finished, he sat down and went in his pocket and got a piece of paper and started writing. So after the service was over, I said, Doc, what were you writing down? He said, I'm writing what else the Holy Spirit said I should have said.
My. Yeah.
And maybe next time, if I get a chance to say it, I'll be sure to say what he told me to say the first time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's it's a never ending, as you very well know. It's a never ending process.
Sure.
Because once you sit down from last Sunday, next Sunday's coming.
Do you preach series at home?
Very rarely.
Rarely.
But I will preach the same text, but I won't preach the same sermon from the same text.
Got you. Okay.
Because I feel as though the people deserves fresh information as the Lord can give it. The late Dr. M.L. Scott Sr. said on one occasion, you remember Dr. Manuel Scott Sr.?
Absolutely.
Said, when you fail to peruse the scriptures for fresh information, say you become stale and stagnant and stuck in the scripture, from which all of that information can come.
Yeah.
So once Sunday's sermon is over, if you're not ahead of yourself, like 2 and 3, and I always try to stay ahead at least 3 or 4 weeks in advance. If once you shall have finished that sermon, then the next one is time, because I don't like cramming.
Right.
And now sometimes, as you very well know, sermons you can be riding along the bus, plane, and a passage, or you can sit and hear a preacher and hear a passage, and you're going to begin writing notes down to file that away to come back to it at a later date. And sometimes that sermon will be too hot to set aside, and you got to go ahead and get that passage developed for sermonic presentation. So I very rarely do series. I do them, but for the most part, I would take a passage of scripture, and if I could squeeze 2 and 3 sermons, maybe 4 out of it, then it is a series. Yeah.
So, as a busy pastor, what advice would you give to a young man listening to this about guarding yourself for preparation? I'm pitching certain questions to you because of your preaching reputation, and I just know enough about preaching to know that people who make it look easy have to work hard to make it look easy, and it takes prep.
Yes.
But there are 100 things in a pastor's life, in the life of the church, that demand your attention. Right. How do you? Well, let me tell you something. The phone calls, the messages, the sick, the meetings, all of that, and the text ain't yelling at you during the week. Right. But boy, that Sunday is coming fast.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What advice would you give about guarding your prep time?
Well, it takes discipline. You've got to arise before the sun does, because generally family is going to arise after the sun gets up. But by the time the sun does awaken, so to speak, you should have gotten in at least 2 hours before anything else moves while it's quiet. And this is an everyday thing. You're doing this to make sure that you and God have been a Moses God kind of thing. You've gone to the mountain, you're spending some time without any distractions. Beyond discipline is delegation. If a person is pastoring, a preacher is pastoring, and they're busy, in demand, etc., it's going to take surrounding him or herself with some individuals who are sharp enough to carry out tasks and delegated responsibilities and directives as they have been assigned and trained by their pastor to do, and do it as though their pastor was doing it. That goes for deacons or trustees who are assigned to certain membership of a congregation. They will take care of the hospital visits unless pastors request it. They will take care of visiting the family in the event of death unless the pastor is requesting. Of course, you're on the phone on in most of those cases. They have to understand that on Sunday, nobody's calling pastor. It's not a funeral. It's not a wedding. It's not a counseling, but everybody's sitting saying, come on, Reverend, come on. And they've worn you out through the week if you allow that. And now you're empty on Sunday with nothing to say because you worn yourself out being pulled here, there, and everywhere when you could have delegated those responsibilities and given directives and direction to individuals to carry out those tasks that you could have done or will have done, but otherwise chose to prepare yourself to help counsel a person in your preaching,
Sure.
to inspire a person in your preaching. And that won't happen without the seat of your pants to the seat of a chair and spending those long hours, etc. So it will take discipline.
Discipline.
True enough, and it's going to take those delegation of those responsibilities, and it's going to take that disposition that says, I disallow anything or anybody from getting in the way of this preaching ministry.
My. Yeah.
That means sacrifice.
Yeah.
You can't go to the park with everybody else all the time.
Yeah.
You know, you got your family time. You know, you're going to do your date night with your wife, etc. But when it comes to all of the other social attractions, it takes that kind of disposition that says, I can't go out there. This is a part of life that I can't enjoy right now, at least, because this is my calling.
Yeah.
When you go to a repair shop for your car, you don't want a novice working on your car. You want an expert. That expert technician is going to go to school or to be recertified every 3 to 6 months because they got to read and keep up with technology because technology is moving just that fast. If you don't, then chances are your car either will not be repaired or half repaired because it's not being repaired by a person who is up on the latest technology. So the person who comes to your pew on Sunday morning, you don't know what kind of repair work they need, but they came to the expert, somebody who's supposed to be up on it. And if you haven't prepared yourself and set the time to get a message prepared, and you don't even know they're out there with some engine issues, some whatever issues, but somewhere in that 20 to 30 minute segment is some work on that aspect of their lives that's being damaged or challenged. And when they leave here, they may never shake your hand, but the car's running.
Yes, sir.
So some things I would like to do and places I would like to go, and because of what I do, then, you know, I have to wave goodbye to family sometimes or friends, or I can't make it or can't do this because, and they don't necessarily know that this is what I'm getting a sermon ready, I'm working on a lesson or whatever. I just can't make it right now. I know what I've got to do.
Yeah, that's encouraging for me to hear. I think of the story often of the maestro who gets off the piano, walks off the stage, and a young man is standing on the side and says, man, I'd give my life to play like that. Oh, really? And the old maestro said, I did.
Oh, I did. This is why I'm on the piano. Yeah. And it's a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice. For you to master any skill, and the word of God demands no less. Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, that is great advice. Yes. So, my father was under the mold of the Gardner Taylor. Manuel Scott in Los Angeles was a contemporary of my dad, M.C. Williams, these men. My father kind of was the orator style of preacher. Those were the men he invited. And then, man, somebody gave me a Jasper Williams tape. Oh, wow. And my whole world changed. Wow. And I was determined to be a hooper. Oh, yeah. And it drove my dad crazy. And my dad publicly rebuked me in service, and I did not care. And I was determined I was going to be a part of my repertoire, and it became. But then I also started pastoring. When I started pastoring, I also landed in a church, my father's church, where they hadn't been used to that, and they appreciated it, but I better have something to say. You mentioned earlier the cultural setting you grew up in, and then you moved to Detroit. My question is about hooping. And we're talking about a changing cultural time.
that we live in, but also a sense in which some are fixated purely with the touching of emotion, and not providing substance.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm landing on the question, but just say something about what your thoughts are about celebration in preaching.
I think celebration and preaching in the African American culture is just that. It's a part of our culture. We are privy to express ourselves with music. And the lyrical preacher, you know, the one who intones towards closure of their sermon. They're only exercising, you know, that part of their culture that has produced them. This is not to insult the intellectual presentation or posture of our forefathers.
Yeah.
But I think celebration is a personal thing. It is not essential to the delivery of the sermon. And people appreciate it, but they can do without it because some of the most powerful pastors and preachers in this world that you and I have heard were not necessarily preachers who intoned or who were lyrical or who hooped it out.
Right.
So first of all, the sermon is a tool. The African just puts music with the tool and delivers a sermon, sweetens it up towards the end. So having said that, I think the sermon itself should be substantive enough, not with the objective of moving people emotively, but making sure that they have been enlightened and inspired. It's not my responsibility to shout anybody. My responsibility is to give them marching orders. And once the sermon is over, the question is, do they have or does that person have marching orders? Was it practical enough? Was it comprehensive enough? Was it doable enough to take from the pulpit to the pew, from the pew to the other side of the church's sidewalk? If I have not done that, hollering certainly isn't going to do it because that's all it is. I mean, you're just celebrating. It's over. The sermon has been over.
Right.
But if the person doesn't have any answers, you know, if they cannot apply it, if it is not practical enough, then I failed them. So it's good that a pastor or preacher is gifted enough to do it, but it is not essential. I don't believe to the sermon or the sermonic delivery or the real meaning or purpose for the message. Help the person with their issues. And my pastor, Dr. Matthews, I keep referring to him. He said, son, you're in college, and he seminary teacher. He said, when you stand to preach, he said, you're an educated young fella. He said, apply your education. But don't forget grandma sitting in that corner. And he said, she don't give a rickum frackum about your education. But you can't insult the one who is educated, because if you underestimate what they know, you've insulted them. And if you speak too much towards the intellect, towards that dynamic, then you've embarrassed grandma because all she has is a third-grade education. So somewhere you got to make sure that your message is plain enough for the person who may not have extensive education, but also profound enough for the intellectual to say, okay, he's interested enough for me to sit through this for 30 minutes, otherwise I'm in agony. You know?
And say on one end, it should not be driven by emotion, but also you do not want to be in the pulpit giving a classroom lecture with no passion.
Thank you.
As you said,
thank you.
It ain't moved you, it ain't going to move anybody else.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So I think it's good. It's a dynamic of our culture, black church worship, and this is not to insult any other racial dynamic, but this is our aura, our style of worship. We're just musically inclined. And our people respond.
So two more questions. You are prominent pastor, strong itinerant ministry. You're the leader of a ministers and pastors division. You get exposed to a lot of preaching. What do you see as you're seeing preaching and preachers right now that encourages you and that concerns you?
I think I am seeing a challenge with societal norms towards the traditional church set or setting, the LGBTQ community presents a challenge to the traditional church now as that segment of society has become a part of our dialogue. I think that the church is becoming more liberal in its disposition in terms of accepting. When I was coming along, as well as yourself, man, you wear a starch collar, necktie, put on a suit. I don't care how hot it was, but the generation on the scene now is casual, which is fine. It's all right. It depends on what a person prefers to wear. But in my day, women didn't wear pants. Sort of thing. So many of the cultural walls that were present and prevalent in my childhood are being torn down, and I think the church is becoming more receptive and liberal in that regard. So I see that change as a challenge, but the message of the preacher, black or white, should never change because of cultural shifts. You take any type of music, soul, rhythm, blues, rock, or pop, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. When we were coming along, songs were heard on 33 wax label, or 33 wax records, 33, 45, 45 to 8-track, 8-track to cassette, cassette to mini cassette, mini cassette to CD, CD to DVD. And the same songs that we heard on a 33 record, now we hear it and see the artist on DVD. So the medium has changed, but the message still remains the same. And I think it becomes our responsibility as pastors, preachers, to make sure that we do not lose the authenticity of our witness and our message while we see these cultural barriers falling or disappearing, or these cultural shifts that are finding their presence in our churches.
The simplest way I know to say it right now is in the generation of my life's ministry, the cultural shift I describe is simply as the church is no longer having home field advantage in the culture. It's just
that's powerful.
It's the culture does not embrace those things that are essential to the church anymore, and it's exerting pressure, and the church has got to learn how to play
It's a challenge.
On the road.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I agree.
So, my last question, you stumble over a time machine and are able to go back 32 years to Tellis Chapman in his mid-20s, moving from Mississippi to Detroit, Michigan, starting a 32-year journey. What does this seasoned Tellis Chapman say to the young Tellis Chapman if you could go back and give him advice?
I would tell him, be a lot more patient. You went too fast. Be more patient. And I've always sought counsel. I was always taught to seek counsel, but I was a bit eager in some instances. I would also tell him, whatever it takes, seek the academy. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, hang around the academy and learn some more and prepare yourself even better than how you have become. So those are the main things that I would share with a younger Tellis Chapman because sometimes aspiration can be a detriment if you're too eager to accomplish your goals and your aspirations.
Boy, those are two things that I would say to myself. And I would say, to be honest, just in case my pastor hears this, Melvin Wade, as a young pastor, he said, the road will be there, son. Go get as much schooling as you can. And you're just so eager to.
Now we know.
Now we know.
But then we were too eager.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank God for life's experience.
And we were talking earlier about Joseph. As you said to me earlier, that you don't get to chapter 50 of Genesis without chapter 37.
Without chapter 37.
Yes, sir. Praise God for that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All the best.
All the best. And thank you for watching this conversation. And again, you can check out other conversations at hbcharlesjr.com. And I hope you'll join us again.